Welcome to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. Me with Brian. Brian, for everyone out there listening, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Brian Booth. I'm associate professor here in the Department of Bioengineering at Clemson University down here in South Carolina.
Can you please tell me a little bit about what you do with bioengineering?
Sure. Other than teaching classes, right, I've got a cancer research lab where our primary focus is on breast cancer, and we're looking mainly at cancer stem cells and how they interact with the cells around them in what's called the microenvironment.
Now, when you talk about cancer stem cells, can you explain a little bit about what those are? Are those just cells that are infected with cancer?
So cancer is not usually an infection. It's a genetic mutation, but so cancer stem cells, they are in theory, they are the cells that have the mutations and then start growing exponentially. They are also known as tumor initiating cells. So they're the seeds, if you want, for tumor growth and expansion.
So are you able to find, like, I guess, an abnormality between those cells and regular cells as well, too? Like,
Yes.
when I know it's very hard to predict, like, how someone gets cancer or if someone's going to get cancer. I know we go by, like, did someone in your family have cancer? Could that be a possible thing as well, too? But then they talk about smoking. They talk about so many environmental influences, which makes it really, really difficult to understand it a little bit as well, too, at least what really can cause it. I'm just wondering, when it comes to being able to help treat it as well, too, I know we have cancer therapies out there, but are we getting better at being able to predict if someone is going to, like, if there's something maybe that we don't see with technology? Is it based on technology or does it based on the science that we have right now?
I don't know about prediction. They can do genetic screenings and they might be able to say, well, you've got this and so many odds of developing this type of cancer. But then again, many people have those so-called cancer genes and they never develop cancer. So it's not so much prediction. I mean, people are definitely trying that, researching that. But early detection is still the best
Method.
way to get rid of it, to beat it. If you wait too long and it's full blown stage 4, it's not as good as finding it when it's really small.
Do you think, like, we're getting into an area where if we detect a cancer cells in someone and they are active and they are progressing, that we can be able to find a way to stop it, not just with like chemotherapy or things of that sort, but being able to replace cells with new ones?
Replace cells with new ones.
I know that's a weird question, but I'm just curious because, like, you got this thing, a disease that people suffer from, and there's right now we understand it, but like I said, we don't understand it 100% of, like, to what the causation is of it. But even we don't know at the rate that it could accelerate. In one person, it could accelerate to an exponential level where next thing you know, they're hitting at this very, very core issue that you need to deal with. And then some people, they have this thing that seems to slowly over time, over a long period of time, affect them.
Mhm. So what was the question again?
um, when it comes to cancer cells, for instance, are we getting to a spot like where does let me just ask you this, where does your work primarily follow when it comes to if you identify a cancer cell?
Our work, we're not identifying cancer cells. We have cancer cells already, and we are trying to um, make them more susceptible to treatments by differentiating them, changing their uh, growth patterns, their gene expression patterns, trying to make them, like I said, more killable.
How do you change their gene expression patterns?
That's what we're working on. So, um, yeah, I'll go back to the beginning, right? Everybody has cancer cells in their body all the time, but you don't develop tumors because your immune system comes in and wipes them out. Usually, so what we're looking at is how come those cancer cells that everybody has doesn't or don't expand into tumors, right? So there's signals, whether they're physical or chemical signals, coming from the normal cells surrounding these mutated cancer cells, and they're keeping them in check, and then waiting for your natural killer cells or immune cells to come in and destroy these cancer cells. So what the primary focus of the main project in my research lab is to determine what those signals are that are coming from these normal cells to keep those cancer cells in check. And the bigger hypothesis theory is that if we can differentiate cancer stem cells, they will become more susceptible, because most chemotherapies right now target those fast dividing cells, right? But the cancer stem cells generally are not dividing that fast, so they're not susceptible to the current treatments. But if we can change those somehow to be more susceptible, we can kill the seed, kill the root of the weed, right? And then they don't come back.
So in a way, we're just snipping off branches. We're not even attacking really the root problem. So when it comes to being able to figure out like what would kill the root or what would be able to attack that core cell, have you guys come up with any like strong evidence of a certain area that would be a causation or be able a way to be able to target that root easier?
Well, not universal. Cancer is thousands of different diseases under one umbrella. And breast cancer, the stuff that we focus on, is still, historically it's been broken down into three main types, right? ER positive, HER2 positive, triple negative. But then if you go down genetically, there's hundreds of different types depending on where the mutation is. So I don't believe there will ever be a universal treatment cure other than surgery, to really destroy these cancer stem cells, those seeds of the tumors that I've been talking about.
Where do you see the stronger correlation, physical or chemical, from these cells? That seems to be like the most, I guess,
Oh,
the
yeah,
yeah.
that depends on the week and the experiment we do, right? So probably chemical, little signaling molecules that move back and forth between the cells. But then there's different ways that those signals are delivered as well. So we're looking into that as well. There's definitely a physical, a biophysical component to that as well. But right now we have more evidence that chemical signals might play just a little bit of a bigger role.
When it comes to chemical, could you give me some examples of a chemical one? And I think I have a physical one in my head. Is that just getting hit hard there? Could that change the cell, or could that? I know that sounds crazy, but I
So
always,
right.
yeah.
So I'm talking much smaller, like cell to cell physical contact between different cells, not car accidents or getting punched in the shoulder. That might have an impact, but we look at it much smaller at the cellular level than molecular level than environmental factors or physical injuries. But those definitely have I would say, more environmental than physical injuries. But yeah, they have an impact as well.
Because I know I've talked to people about like exposures when it comes to either the environment or maybe some common household solutions or products. Like even dust can be a contaminant as in sorts as well too. Hairspray is a big one. I know there was a big thing about hairspray being a factor when it comes to maybe it could produce cancer cells. I mean, Johnson and Johnson recalled their shampoo, one of some of their products, on like cancer causing chemicals. I'm like, I get it that like everything can kind of be one of these cancer causing things when you don't know what really causes cancer. There's a wide, vast variety of it. But I start wondering is like, if we talk about like a genetic thing, for instance, can something that I could consume on a daily basis, like I know people that smoke 6 packs a day, It like insane amount, but they're not dying of lung cancer than a person that's just exposed to secondhand smoke. I mean, is that just our cells interaction with these chemicals is just like a random probability that you might have a bad interaction, or is it just the constitute of what creates those things?
Yeah, all of the above. Probably. So my grandfather smoked probably from the time he was 14 to the day he died, and never developed lung cancer. He had other problems associated with it, heart disease and stuff like that. But and then somebody who lives this pristine life, never smoked, never was a minor, develops lung cancer. Did they get hit by a solar flare? Who knows? Um, so there's no one answer for, well, at least there's no answer that I know of or anybody's come up with yet, why your neighbor gets cancer and you don't, and you're living right next to each other and you're exposed to mainly the same sort of stuff all the time, right? Yeah, I don't think there's an answer to that question yet.
Does it does it I guess upset you, or does it get you kind of in this state of like, I mean, it's like a puzzle. You want to finish the puzzle, but it's so hard because there's a lot of things that just I don't necessarily think it's the stuff that we don't know. I just think maybe is it technology a factor? A lot of we don't know a lot of these things. I mean, even for the general public, me asking you questions about cancer, it's going to be new information for most of the people out there because we hear about it, we know it's a horrible thing, but necessarily we don't really understand what factors could be those types of things. We know things can cause cancer, but we don't know necessarily how that reaction happens.
Right. And it depends. There's no straight answer for your question that I know of. So, it depends on the chemical, like, or the you mentioned dust or radiation from your cell phone. They all have different interactions with the cells in your body, right? And there's so much empty space between atoms, if you want to get really down into the it's not quite nanobiology, right? But there's so many different ways that all of those carcinogens can interact with your cells, and they all have different mechanisms of inducing cancer. So I don't think there's one straight answer yet.
Okay. Can you give me some example of some of your experiments?
Sure. We take normal cells and cancer cells and mix them together in specific ratios. So we'll take, 50,000 cancer cells and 50,000 normal cells, mix them together, put them in a dish, grow them up, and then look at their gene expression patterns. And then we'll take the same cells and mix them in a different ratio. We'll do like 50,000 normal cells and 1,000 cancer cells, mix those in a dish, grow them up, and look at their gene expression patterns. And then we can compare those gene expression patterns to tumors and normal cells that we find in animals or in people. And we can induce our cancer cells, we call it redirecting cancer cells. So we can change the cancer cells so they no longer form tumors, and they've developed they've changed their gene expression patterns to mimic those, or not mimic, to be almost identical to those of normal cells. So we call it the cellular plasticity, where you can change different types of, one cell can change into another type of cell. And so we can force these cancer cells to become, quote, normal. They're not normal because they still have those genetic mutations, but they don't form tumors anymore. They don't have that accelerated cell growth, and they're expressing the same genes that normal cells do. Now, what we're still trying to figure out is how that's working. So we know it works, but we've got to reverse engineer it and come back and see, like, why is it working? That's where those intercellular signals come in, those chemicals and physical little signals that they're going between the different cells. And once we figure that out, we'll get some prizes, hopefully.
Well, what do you think? I mean, if you can re-engineer a cancer cell to maybe not where it's still going to be a cancer cell, but it's not going to produce tumors. It's not going to produce something that's harmful to that person. In a sense, that's a form of treatment. That is a very effective form besides going through like chemotherapy or something like that and killing it. Which
That's
I mean,
hope, yeah.
yeah, for the longest time, we as just in medicine, a lot of the answers to things have been like just torch the fields type scenarios. They've been like clear out the whole thing because it just seems like it infects everything. And it's very hard to just pick out the very specific ones. But if you're able to re engineer cancer cells where it's not growing tumors and it's not maybe lethal or dangerous, it's not going to lead to someone dying, in a sense, is there a way to be able to also find out the cure with that as well too? I mean, if you could take away all its lethality and make it just kind of this cell that is still a mutated one, but it's a cell that's not going to cause damage, is there a way to find out what tricked it to be this type of active cancer cell?
Well, most cancers have, things in common, whether there's specific genes that have been mutated or stuff like that. So scientists and physicians know generally the mutations that cause cancer. But why do some cells that have those mutations become cancer, and why do the same cells not become cancer? And I think, well, our belief is that it's where those cells are located within your body, within those, we call it microenvironments, the exact locations, those spatial relations between all the other cells. I think that's going to be a focus of a lot of research, and in the next couple of years, trying to figure out what's keeping some cancer cells in check and what is letting them, grow and expand and make tumors and metastasize and stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it's just funny to me because you say what we believe, and then I also see you picking your words carefully. Where I'm like, is it a highly controversial topic when it comes to the idea of like what cause? I understand like there's a wide, much we don't know about what causes cancer. There's a wide things of that do cause cancer, but when it comes to narrowing it down, I mean, is it that controversial when it comes to just methods and treatments and forms of this sort? Because what you were explaining to me, biohacking, it's bioengineering as well too, but it also can have a tandem with nanomedicine. I mean, we get that to a very, very high point. You'll be able to go inside the body a little bit easier and be able to communicate with cells and, let's say, get rid of some of these cancer cells or find specific areas where these cancer cells are. And I wouldn't say prevention like I did before, but in a way you could be able to look at these things and examine them better and be able to understand them a little bit deeper.
Mhm. Well, one of the reasons I'm picking my words is I'm not an MD, and I'm not an oncologist. I don't treat patients. So, and at the same point, I don't want to say something that's misconstrued by you or someone who happens to be watching or listening and say, what is wrong with this guy? That's not true. So I want to make sure that I'm saying what I want to say, or mean what I'm intending to mean. Um, does that clear?
Yeah, well, let's enter the realm of what the show is and it's conversation. And we'll, instead of me asking questions, why don't you just feel like you explain what you have found out through the work that you've done?
We can take stem cells from other parts of your body, or a mouse's body or a rat's body, and we have this is where I don't want to get up, because there are so many people who are against animal testing, right? And some of our work is in mice and rats. And
Is that controversial? And we know people know that they test animals. There's
yeah,
like an
so
article every week in the news about it.
it depends on who you ask, right? So the people down the hall here, it's not controversial as long as it's done ethically and morally and all that stuff. But there are groups of people who think all animal testing should be outlawed. And if we could find great alternatives, I'm all for that. I hate animal testing, and I just finished teaching a class on it because I want people to do it right, and ethical, and no, don't cause pain and anything like that. So, we can't get human volunteers to
Yeah.
to take all this stuff. And, and I'm sure there's ethical questions in that as well. Computer models are getting better, but computer models are still based on the information that we already know. The computer model is only as good as the computer engineer who designs it, right? So if they don't put in the right information, the model's not as good. So,
Well, I get what you're saying. It's a hard thing because we don't. I'm with you. I don't want animal testing either, but it also is a factor of it's the best thing that we can really do. I mean, we talk about injecting humans with whatever. It's a little bit different, but at the same line, I mean, animal rights, all these types of things. I understand that those factors out there, but I also think with science, especially something as important as cancer, it is something we need to figure out. And I mean, it sucks the methods sometimes of what you got to do. I mean, as long as they're not super, super drastic, but with the technology we have right now, we want the most accurate information. And that still comes from using it that way. And like the program simulators aren't there yet.
yeah. So, we can grow cancer cells in the lab in a plastic dish, and those are generally in 2 dimensions. But we've, last 20 years, 25 years, we've developed new methods where they grow in 3 dimensions, which is more relevant to your body because your body's not 2 dimensional. But then again, there are thousands of different types of cells in your body, and they all do different things. And when we're growing these little cultures in the lab, we have 2, maybe 3 different cell types. So there's a lot less information going on, which allows us to dissect it easier and get results. But it's not your body, right? There's thousands of different things going on all at the same time. So it's still the best model we have is in vivo animal testing. But we want to do as many experiments in the lab before we get there, make sure we're doing it right.
Is there ever a fear when you grow a cancer cell that if it does, like, maybe it's not 100% exact to what a human cancer cell is? I mean, is there ever that kind of thought in your head where you go, I mean, it's close. It's like 99.9%, but that point one can be like with Windex. I still question what's that point one that gets through the barrier there where you start wondering. I mean, if you can grow a cancer cell and you can one day maybe work up to someone signing up for that trial that wants to do it, and you get in there. I mean, what happens if you get the cells that are able to attack the cancer cell you created, but you still can't get over the fact that it won't attack the cancer cells that are already in there?
Well, that's why we do the research, right? Is to answer those questions and try to find that 0.1%. So I don't worry about that when we're doing our experiments, because nothing is ever perfect. Nature's not perfect, life's not perfect. People can, the companies develop these great drugs, it's going to help 98% of those people, right? But there's still going to be that 2% that's not going to be helped. So you gotta, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but you do the best you can.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can get that 98% and make it better the next time, and make it better the next time. But you can't sit there and worry about that 0.1%. There you go, mad.
So when it comes to something like, maybe because you definitely have a lot more information than I do on this topic, I'm still generally new. If you could explain at least a little bit about something what you think is valuable information that you pulled out of from your work.
Our normal cells are a source of anti-cancer properties, or I think we can turn what's already in our body, turn them on, increase something in our body to help fight cancer. Instead of relying on all these external toxic, super toxic chemotherapy drugs, I think in the future we will be able to turn on our cells, make them produce more of these anti-cancer signals, and help reduce, stop the spread of cancer.
Similar to kind of like with people's testosterone over time kind of weans. It's like a dimmer switch. Light gets dim. Now, if you're able to use your body as a natural deneuralizing agent when it comes to cancer cells. It might be a property in our bodies that we might have, and then it might wean over time, and we haven't found a way to be able to measure it in a sense. Or it might be something that we can charge our body up to be able to have this type of factor to be able to handle the cells better. I mean, we know our immune system handles viruses. I mean, from all wide ranging things. I mean, the amount of viruses and bacteria that's out there that our
Bacteria
body,
is everywhere, yeah.
yeah, that our body naturally just takes out without us even knowing about it. We have people say, like, I got sick. How long are you sick? 2 days. I mean, that same sickness could affect someone for a week or two.
Yeah, kill
So
somebody, you know.
when it comes to cancer cells, why can't we do that? Like, there's got to be a factor in us that can do that.
Yeah, I agree, and that's what I'm trying to find. And I believe right now it's not just one factor; it's going to be a combination of many things. But yeah, so I believe in my lifetime, hopefully, if we find everything, that we'll be able to come up with this whole new type of anti-cancer treatment by harnessing and utilizing the power of our cells that we already have to kill these cancer cells, or at least slow them down.
So what creates a cancer cell? Like, when you're creating one, what exactly factors do you put into that little petri dish or whatever to be able to create one?
So yeah, my lab doesn't generally create cancer cells. We harvest tumors, we buy them from somebody else. But yes, you can create cancer cells either by mutating a gene, adding a new gene, something like that. But the stuff we use, we either buy cell lines, which someone else has produced, and you buy them from a company and just grow them up and they're all the same. Or we take tumors from mice, rats, even people, and we can dissociate them into, and take that tumor lump, break it up into single cells, and we can grow those cells. So yeah, we have multiple ways of growing cancer cells. We don't generally make the cancer cells, but we buy them or get them from actual tumors.
When you're talking about growing them, though, what factors cause them to grow? Like, can you make them grow at a faster rate than?
Yes.
Okay, so what are you putting into that to make it grow? Because I
So
start thinking you can,
there's
if you can figure out what makes it grow, then you can also find a way that can kill it as well too, without
yes,
using radiation.
right. So yeah, there's lots of things. Sugar, different minerals,
Wait.
nutrients in
What type of sugar? What type of sugar?
Well, yeah, that's all of them, right? You
Well,
give a kid,
artificial sweeteners, though. Everyone uses those.
they don't work the same. It all breaks down to glucose, right? That magical sugar that most cells use. Your brain cells only use sugar, general or glucose for energy primarily. There's always a portion that doesn't. But anyway, so yeah, sugars, vitamins, nutrients, but mainly it's small proteins called growth factors. Generally, these are, what are they, between 30 and 70 amino acids long, but they're really small, and they're produced by different cells, and they either use them themselves or send them out to their buddy, their next door neighbor cell, and they take it in, and that causes the gene expression to make them divide and grow and proliferate. So in those gene expression profiles that I was looking at or talking about before, we're looking for those genes and proteins that we know cause cell proliferation, cell growth, or can cause cell death or cell senescence, where they just sit there, or quiescence, where they don't grow, they're just sitting there. So we're trying to find the combination of all those different nutrients, sugars, growth factors, cytokines, hormones. That's another big one. If we can find that combination to tell these cancer cells to slow down, don't grow, or even die, I think we would have a much better way to fight
When it
cancer.
comes when it comes to hacking the body to be able to handle these cancer cells on their own, have you ever thought about being able to modify the cells that it's around to be able to not accept any of that information or any of that code that the cancer cell sending?
Yes. So we've got little peptides, these little protein, these little amino acid sequences, which we can design. We do this with a lady upstairs, actually. She's great. But she has these little peptides where we put a sequence on one end that binds a specific receptor on, well, in this case, cancer cells. And then you can attach either a drug or what we call an siRNA, a small inhibiting RNA, which blocks gene expression. And so these little peptides bind to the cell then takes it in like it would anything else. And then that chemotherapy drug siRNA gets in the cell and does its magic, either kills the cell or makes it grow faster. So yeah, we can modify individual cells, whole slew of cells to express or not express different proteins, different genes. We can give them direct drugs. So yeah, we're working on a whole bunch of different things. Yeah.
Does it ever become an issue because you have to worry about that drug killing every single last bit of that infection cell? So I start wondering, does that mean that person has to come back if the cancer comes back and grab that drug? Like, would it be easier to find a way to somehow, like how white blood cells can tackle certain viruses or bacteria? Could you have something where you can hack your whole body system to where it reads something that necessarily isn't good, and then you could just have it attack it and make sure it clears it out for good?
So one of the other things they're working on is to use light or magnets in specific areas. So what we've there's some other people here, they develop these nanoparticles, whether they're either magnetic or light sensitive, and you put chemotherapies or drugs on them, and you can give them systemically, give them to your whole body, but they're not going to do anything. They are non-toxic until they're activated by either magnets, or in our case, we use a specific wavelength of red light, where, if you've got a tumor, say you've got melanoma on your arm, you can the idea is you give somebody these particles, and they accumulate all over your body, but then you focus that light or that magnet right there, and that activates them. So they're only activated right there. So they kill all the cells that are right there, which is going to be all those cancer cells. So we can direct the tumor, direct our anti-tumor treatments to specific areas in your body. They do that with radiation for brain cancers and stuff like that. You can really focus the treatment type, or your treatment to specifically exactly, that sounds silly, specifically where you want it. So you're not damaging your whole body, like, back in the 70s and 80s, when you get the full body radiation, people were sick, really sick, and the treatments were almost as toxic as the cancer cells. But yeah, so we're working on focusing our treatments to precise spots in your body to kill everything that's right there.
Does it ever get difficult though? Because I think if you focus in on a specific spot, there is a big cost when it comes to getting rid of that whole area, not just one specific thing you're trying to eliminate.
Well, that depends on how big of an area you're looking at, right? So if you're just, looking at small, really small spots, taking out a mole like a dermatologist would, that's not that big of a deal. But if you've got a baseball-sized tumor, that's probably not the best kind of treatment for you. You want that most likely surgically taken out. And then we could go back post-surgery, and if the surgeon missed any of the cancer cells, we could focus our treatments right there and try to kill any of those residual cancer cells.
Now, you mentioned physical causations like cells bumping into each other. How does something like that happen?
So what I was talking about was the opposite of that. It's the cells holding each other in place so the cancers don't form. Yeah. So if the idea is for us is, it's those cells surrounding that first cancer cell, that tumor initiating cell. It's got chemical and physical barriers to keep that cell in check. But cells always divide, right? So A cell's going to divide. So now there's two of those cancer cells, but there's still enough normal cells around them to physically hold them in place and to chemically keep them in place. But then they divide again. And so now there's 4 cancer cells. That's just the way normal cells grow, right? And then once they get to 8 or 16, there's going to be cells, those mutated cells. I'm holding on my hands. It's getting bigger and bigger. Those cells that are in the middle now that are isolated from the normal cells, so it doesn't have that exact physical contact, or the chemicals can't get through there, those chemical signals. So we think it's once those cells are far enough away from the normal cells, then they can really express themselves and grow and bloom and form massive proliferating tumors.
So there's a danger with getting rid of the cells surrounding the cancer cells, only because it gives them, it's like a plant. If you have a bigger yard, your plant's probably going to be a little bit
Yes.
bigger.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That seems like, see, that's just so, I mean, it makes sense. It makes logical sense, but it's just so, it's complex because it's then like, I mean, if you try and think of a way, if you're going to biohack cells, the best thing would be to make sure that there's no information or there's no cells for it to infect. So you would want to get those cells away from it. But then if you start thinking, well, that lets them grow and multiply even more. So then it's like you got this thing where I can understand now why they would just use the torch the fields method for the longest time. But I also think with the technology that we have and the different avenues we have, we got to find a way to be able to fix that as well too. Where I just start wondering if we talk about hormones, I mean, when people get in like that fight or flight response, their immune system can drop, a bunch of factors because other things get funneled in other directions of your body to be able to handle the situations that you're in. And I start wondering, like, how many people are dealing with lack of sleep? How many people are dealing with mental health issues? How many people are dealing with a whole host of factors now that their body is now occupying compared to maybe 20 years ago, even with our technology advancing, where you start wondering, is it going to be, I mean, have you seen the range from cancer increase over the past couple of years, or have you seen it decrease?
Uh, Again, I'm not an MD, but so I could be wrong. Probably usually am. But the overall numbers of cancer cases are increasing. But that's could be down to a bunch of different factors. There are more people. People are living longer. We have better detection technology, and most countries have free healthcare where you can go and get treated, tested easier, right? So I think that I don't know that the actual numbers, percentages of people getting cancer are higher overall, but well, okay, the actual numbers are going up, but I think that there's a bunch of different factors. I don't know that we've seen an overall increase in the percentage of people getting cancers or getting them younger or anything like that. I just think, there's people are living longer. So there's more people we have much better detection technology. So I don't know if the overall percentage of cancers is increasing or not.
How much weight do you put on the exposure that we are with all the devices that we have? Like, I'm not a 5G guy. I'm not that type at all. But I also like, I stand by my microwave a lot and I stare in the little window.
Well, we've had microwaves for we got one back in the 80s, right? So I don't have any. That's not my focus. I don't worry about it. I remember a couple years ago, you weren't supposed to have your laptop on your lap anymore
Yeah.
because, I don't know. I've got 2 kids, so
Well, I was just
hasn't
bringing
impacted me.
I was bringing that up because of the if the numbers are going up. I mean, if we don't see a correlation with maybe younger generations, or if there is a correlation with younger generations, I mean, these would be common things. I mean, we do use technology a lot more than we did before, and I think with like signals devices, I don't think it's like necessarily harmful. But when you have it up to your head 24/7, like people playing in front of their screens or their iPads so close to their face, I mean, you're consuming a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So
I think if there was going to be an increase, we would have seen it by now, and we would have heard a lot more than that fringe element that says, 5G is bad, or I don't live under power lines. That was the thing when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Don't live under power lines because they're all weird. Strange things happen in those houses. Okay. But I think if that was a huge concern, it would have been, you would have seen an explosion, and we haven't seen that I know of. Yeah.
So when we talk about like, for another example of a common cancer causing thing that I can think of would be like the sun. I know a lot of people deal with a lot of issues when it comes to skin cancer. It's not the same as, I mean, is like, do you know what the causation to breast cancer is, or is it just that Y thing? We don't know what causes cancer on that part.
So like I said, there are many different types of breast cancer. One of them, not the primary, a large percentage of them is due to family history and genetics. If you've got a couple different breast cancer genes that are mutated, you've got a pretty good chance of getting breast cancer, or in men, other types of cancers, esophageal cancer, stuff like that. So the genetic factor is probably the highest for breast cancer. And then there are other risk factors, smoking, obviously, alcohol intake, diet, obesity, all that sort of goes into it as well.
Yeah, because I know they said a strong correlation getting breast cancer for women, but I know men can get it as well too. I knew that because the drummer of Kiss had breast cancer,
Yes,
Peter
Peter
Criss.
Chris. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a thing where it's like it's a random selection, but they also can draw a line when it comes to a certain, like if you say mostly women get breast cancer. I mean, that was what I heard for a long time, and then you
Well,
can.
yeah. So the current numbers are 1 in 8 women are going to get breast cancer, right? While it's 1 in 10,000 men. And that number has actually increased a lot in the past 10 years, because it's a thing now. People know that men can get breast cancer, so it's looked for now. But prostate cancer, I think it's 1 in 6 men are going to get prostate cancer. So
What
we've
the
got,
hell is that? Testosterone? Do I need to take out testosterone? That's a like, because I had someone on here talk about prostate cancer, and it was like a really big issue. Like people are actually getting that younger now, and they're actually testing younger as well too. They're saying your prostate exam doesn't need to be when you're 40 or 30. It can be when you're in your 20s. Apparently I'm the prime age for it. I'm 24. So
oh,
I get in this aspect of like, I
you're half
mean,
my age.
what is causing, is that a testosterone thing? Is that because I think a lot of it plays in with our hormones. I think our hormone is like this mixing boiling pot of like a witch's brew of different chemicals, and somehow they interact without us really experiencing a lot of problems. But if you are that person that experiences a problem from a certain thing, too much dopamine, too much whatever you want to say, I mean,
Not
for
enough serotonin. Yeah.
it's just like there's a whole host of issues where I start going, do you speculate on any other like maybe factors like that could be like a prime example of like maybe an area that should be looked into more? I mean, if we talk about maybe a cancer ratio between men and women, I think when it comes to certain cancers, you're going to have more heading towards a different side. But I mean, if we talk about the wide umbrella that is cancer.
So there are a lot of labs, not mine, but a lot of labs in the country and the worldwide, who look at both breast cancer and prostate cancer at the same time, because they have very similar characteristics. They're both primarily cancers of epithelial cells, and the structures of your milk ducts in your breasts, females, and prostate in males. They've got a lot of similarities. So there's a lot of overlap in the research, basic scientific research in the breast cancer and prostate cancer going on. So yeah, they're similar, even though they're primarily in different. Well, prostate cancer only happens in men, right? But so there's overlap. So it's I said before that cancer's 1,000 different diseases under one umbrella, but there's similarities, between different types of cancer. So you can have crossover. And then, you've got a prostate cancer drug. Well, that might work against breast cancer too. So that's a big area of research as well, is testing drugs from other that treat other cancers, repurposing them for use to treat other things. The whole metformin was a was a diabetes drug, but it's a great anti-cancer drug now too. So
Well, it links to what you were saying about sugar. I mean, that's with diabetics as well too, the insulin
and
failures.
then well, yeah, the sugar. There are people that are looking into, and some people believe that diet has a huge impact on cancer, not just the formation, but cancer progression as well. If you're eating, if you got a high sugar diet, a lot of high calories, those cancer cells are just going to suck that up and grow and grow and grow. So yeah, you can change your. I'm not telling you to do this. There are people that will say change your diet and have less sugar and less cancer enhancing stuff in your diet.
Do you know any of the guess common things that could be like cancer, like when it comes to like I know we talk because I always hear about artificial sweeteners, but I also know if we talk about the alternative route, there's like Steve Jobs' method, which he had pancreatic cancer and he did a lot of juice cleanses until the end. It didn't work, he regretted it. But I mean, it is like that is a large thing. I mean, we're learning about the gut and brain connection a lot more now. And now I think a lot more weight's being put into our diets. But at the same time, I mean, it could be a wrong food that you eat could just trick something or bring something into this thing. It might necessarily not be as simple as that. It might be after maybe prolonged exposure to something that could do that. But I look at the diet thing a little bit more. I'm like, there are a lot of people that are, have comorbidities or have some type of obesity issues. It's not saying that they're like, they're wrong or they're any of this. It's just like there is a prioritization on eating and diet and everything like that too. But also that even gets tricky because if we talk about what's the right foods, then you got to look at what those right foods are. Are they being sprayed with chemicals? Are those chemicals going to be cancer causing chemicals? And you're just like,
Right.
right.
Genetically modified food. No. Yeah. So there's so many different viewpoints on that. I don't have a definitive answer for you. I know that there are studies out there that show, the Mediterranean diet is great for certain things, or Japanese diet, the high fish, sushi, rice type things. They live longer, right? Where the majority of the 100-year-old people, Japan, Okinawa, is that based on their diet, their exercise, or who knows? People have ideas. I'm not up on that currently research, but I think diet has a.
Well, speculate with me, Brian. Damn, speculate.
Well, I'm not one to say anything because my diet is terrible. I have that basic American diet, the bad diet, right? So I could die tomorrow. Mine will be heart disease, though. That's my problem.
I'm
That's
gonna
my.
knock on wood for you because you said that.
Thank you.
But a lot of, I
Um,
mean, my diet's really good. I'm a fitness freak, but at the same time, I don't know what's good though, because I know like when I'm eating some of my vegetables and things that I get from the grocery store, there are some things I'm like, damn, I didn't wash this off properly because I can taste the chemical aspect to it. And I mean, I've seen people that are young and fit. It's really weird with the fitness industry. You come across a lot of people that either have like, there's a lot of definitely severe mental issues when it comes to fitness, but also there's a large aspect of people that are suffering with things like, but you work out all the time and you're fit and you got this, you got that. People rarely get sick. That is a real thing. Like their immune system are strong as hell. I don't know if it's all the vitamins you take, but a lot of people in the fitness industry believe in not taking Tylenol. Like me, I don't take Tylenol. Let our body naturally kind of build up this stronger immune system. In some aspects, it's good, but also if you get a severe disease, you need medication. You need something for that to be able to help you, which gets into this area of like, I've heard runner's high, people getting severe rush of whatever to their brain is able to help them in some certain cases, in certain instances. But what do we
I think
talk
that's
about?
a lot
Like,
of mental health.
yeah. But when
Uh,
we talk about like tanning beds, I mean, that's a number one cause right there. If you look at a factor that could lead into cancer, I mean, more people do that than they do working out.
yeah, they're well, yeah, they've. I'm pretty. There's a strong link. I don't to melanoma. It's the same as sitting out in the sun all the time. You go long enough, you're probably going to get it.
Sunscreen doesn't exist, Brian. Sunscreen doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
no, not a tanning bed, right?
That's see, that brings it back to the Johnson recall on some of the shampoos. Now, what's in a lot of their shampoos as well too is like there's a strong amount of zinc. I don't know why there's zinc in shampoo, but there's zinc in those shampoos that they
That's
recalled.
it's for the anti-dandruff
So
stuff, right?
that chemical also in the right amount is good to protect you from the sun.
Yes, and also boost your immune system. And you take those zinc pills when you're getting a cold, and that
So
helps boost your immune system. Yeah.
too much of it can be bad for you in like the worst possible way. And then
Well, that's the what is the old saying? Balance everything in moderation, right? Yeah, diet, water, drink, drugs. I don't know. Just don't overdo it. Don't underdo it.
how much weight do you put in cryonics?
None.
You know what I'm talking about with cryonics, though, right?
Think so.
But freezing things.
Well, oh, you mean like therapy or like Walt Disney's head?
Let's go to the Walt Disney's head example first, and then let's go to the other one, because the ice bath one, that seems like it might shock some cells into
Yeah,
activating in some
it's
sort.
what anti-inflammatory. Well, if you overdo it, you're going to get hypothermia, right? So that's bad. But Walt Disney's head, Ted Williams, the baseball player, all that stuff that they're sitting in tanks out there in Arizona. I don't have any. I think that's a useless waste of time.
Well, could that way be able to help with cancer cells in a sense as well too, where you're able to freeze them, at least stop them from growing?
Yeah, we can. We store cells in liquid nitrogen and cryopreserve them, and we can keep them in there for 10, 15 years and pull them out and they'll grow again. That's just a way of storing them if we can't use them right away. I don't think you can do that with a multicellular organism yet, or for maybe ever. Those are scientific story or science fiction stories where you can put them in you know hibernation, deep sleep, and go light years away. I don't think we'll ever, not in my lifetime anyway, get
Well,
to that.
the reason why I asked this question is because if we talk about the area of biohacking to be able to, change a cancer cell into something that's non-lethal, I mean, where I would think that this would be a priority would be in people that are experiencing super activated symptoms in a short amount of time. And I mean, if we can have something that can prolong someone's life, like the area of cryonics can, in a sense of what they say that you can freeze somebody and, find a way to thaw them out or whatever, when they come up with a cure for something, I start going, is there a way to be able to find a way to decrease or be able to freeze the cancer cell in general, not with actual ice, but with some other type of method, maybe a chemical release, whatever you want to say, just to make sure we can give them a little bit more time to get the proper treatment that they need to get rid of the thing that they have. So maybe not like an actual alternative treatment, but a step method where you have this type of tandem.
Lower your body temperature or lower temperature in that specific spot. Is that what you're asking?
I mean, not maybe exactly with cold, but maybe with just like a type of medication, or maybe something that you've come up with. I mean, your type of research could be not just an alternative treatment, which could be the end goal, but could also be a process of being able to slow somebody's cancer growth to make sure they can get the proper treatment that we have right now for it.
I've never thought of that.
Hooray! I got something.
Hey, there might be other people looking into it, right? Tumor cells, tumors are hot, right? Tumors, you can look at somebody with a imaging or just a thermometer and say, take their temperature in different spots. Like, well, okay, the tumor is going to be 2 or 3 degrees warmer than the rest of your body because they're growing so fast and burning up all that, you're creating all that energy. People are trying to slow them down by taking away their nutrients, right? I guess if you could slow them down by cooling them down, that might work. I have no idea.
Well, we have types of like chemicals and things that we use for X-rays and sort. When you drink it, they go, you're immediately going to feel hot, or you're immediately like liquid iodine, or something where can you find a drug that does the same exact thing, but you start feeling cold in a sense, maybe not to you're all over your body, but in a specific area that might be something that can at least damper or hinder the progress of growth in cancer cells, at least in an extreme scenario where you have someone like, you ever hear Lee Harvey or Jack Ruby that killed Lee Harvey Oswald? he got cancer right before his freaking court date. Like, I'm just saying, that's weird as hell, man. I mean, they have, dude, the
He
government
had
has,
some other issues going on too.
yeah, no, but the government has like these ways of like,
Oh
they had
no, deep state conversation. Here we
I
go.
well, I wouldn't call it deep state, but I mean, like the documents came out about Castro, like they were trying to find ways to give him cancer. Like it's just crazy stuff like that. Where you start going, if they're thinking in that way, what are they thinking in the opposite way? Like if you accidentally, are exposed to something. We had people that were exposed to Agent Orange, and they figured out that the people that were exposed to Agent Orange, the ones that suffered the most, were the people that were actually guarding the tents of the drum barrels where Agent Orange was. Where I start going, if you are working in the opposite direction of helping people, but in another way to weaponize a type of disease or cancer, whatever you want to say, then you have to be also working on an aspect of the opposite, right? Just in case you're accidentally exposed to it.
Well, it's always easier to blow things up than build things, right?
Damn, that's a good one.
Sometimes blowing stuff up is fun. That was my teenage years. Yeah, it's always easier to, I know, is that the way the universe, entropy.
I love this because I'm putting you in like scenarios where like I don't know, I'm not qualified to. That's the fun of it, is that you have to speculate about some of this stuff as well too. I mean, there's no, at this point, especially when it comes to cancer, with the evidence that we do have and the things that we do have, it's still like you can ask anybody. It's a wide stuff of we don't know. So I start going, any good idea is a good idea.
People are complaining. Some people, we've dropped all this money since what, the 70s, in billions and billions of trillions of dollars into cancer research. And what do we have to show for it? Well, people live longer. We've got some great drugs, but we're basically finding out everything. Well, not everything. The more we learn, the more we realize all the stuff we just don't know. Yeah. So, but there's so much we don't understand. Like, is it chemistry possible to do what you're doing, to make things cold through some chemical reaction? I don't know. I'm not a chemist, but maybe somebody knows. Just so many different people, ideas, like, well, let's try this. This might work. And that's what you need. You're going to need some sort of conglomeration of different ideas and different disciplines. So, I'm in the bioengineering department. I'm a cell biologist. I'm not a mechanical engineer or any sort of engineer, but we've got all these other people, like I mentioned, the professor upstairs who's making peptides. Go down the hallway, there's a person working on heart valves, and then we get all these great ideas to come together. The different disciplines, you get a statistics person, you get a computer modeling person, you put them all together, and maybe I think that's the way we're going to figure out these big answers to health questions, and it's not just going to be the biologist or the immunologist or the oncologist. You're going to need this group think, or I don't want to talk about artificial intelligence because that scares me.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the way, because those things can think a whole lot faster than we can and put ideas together. That's why, if we got 10 people with different backgrounds brainstorming and throwing ideas together, I think that's the future of solving at least medical problems.
Do you put any weight into apps, or not apps, but devices like gene editing when it comes to CRISPR? I mean, if they're able to take out certain DNA things that could be anomalies or things like cancer, but pre-birth, how do we translate that to when
pre-birth? Well, there's an ethical conundrum for you, right?
Well, is it in vitro? I mean, that's what CRISPR is, right? It's all pre-birth or it's in vitro.
Yeah. People are putting them in animals now. Rats and whatever, mice. Pre-birth, that's a big, that's going to be an ethical question. And it's going to be like, do you want to start cloning people? It's the same sort of thing. So are you going to get into, well, we want our kid to be super fast, we're going to edit their genes, or,
I'm just talking about getting rid of the cancer. How do we find a way to do that?
Well, again, do you know that kid's actually going to get cancer? Do you want to, that's like genetically modifying your food. All right. So we've got these disease resistant crops, right, that grow amazingly. but what do they do once they get inside of you? It's back in the historical, let's bring in this animal to take out this pest in this country, right? Well, then there's no natural predators, so they take over. You
Yeah.
don't know what those secondary downstream effects are going to be by taking or modifying something in utero, right? That's why you have to do it, all those experiments in the lab. And yeah, changing people in utero, that's a can of worms I don't want to get involved in.
Well, if we bring it back to what we said before about diet, if we bring something that can inhibit proteins or stop protein molecules from reaching certain areas, maybe I know that sounds nuts, but just making sure that it's not enough to reach certain cells, I feel like your body would probably prioritize certain areas. Like, for instance, if you get cold, your body's going to keep heat towards your organs and keep things to where it needs essential for life. So your fingertips are going to get cold. Your toes are probably going to get cold. It's usually the first things to get frostbite. I start wondering if you can try and find a way. I mean, we know people that eat just liquid diets and things of that sort. If you can find a way to slip in some type of protein blocker or protein inhibitor where that doesn't mess up the rest of your body, but is able to make sure that it doesn't spread and feed the essential nutrients to whatever grows these
Get
cells.
certain people from certain places.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what was it back in the 80s or 90s? They came out with all those different fat substitutes, the olestra and stuff they put on chips so your body couldn't absorb the fats and it just went right through you.
That's junk science.
So yeah, I mean, I imagine there's people thinking about it. It would be really hard to keep something you eat from going to specific places in your body. I have no idea if it's possible.
The reason why I'm asking you these questions and I like asking these questions is because when I see you look up and I see you kind of like thinking deep on it, I know you're kind of like thinking of like, how do I want to say this or how this or how do I
Is it
think of
even
this?
possible? Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what I like is because you obviously, when you work in the field that you work, you're obviously thinking about other things. Necessarily, you might not be working in the science behind what that is, but you're also thinking about it. And that, I mean, that's hope for, especially if we talk about like cancer, for instance, when you're trying to solve something like this. I mean, you could bring up probably things of like, should we even mess with the body? Should we just see what, all this type of stuff. But obviously, it's an issue that people would like to get down to the bottom of it. And I like that, you also kind of entertain the aspect of the questions, even though you're not directly involved in the field. Now, I know you preface it with, I'm not involved in this field, but I think that's what's important about anybody who's researching anything. Because if you're not having those outside thoughts or those types of things that, might not be in the field that you are, they're interesting ideas. They're things to think about and really kind of keep in the mindset when you're trying to create something that could literally be revolutionary. I mean, do you think that we'll ever get rid of cancer? I know that's the hope, but do you think we'll ever get to a point where it's not something that we have to deal with or worry about people dying from?
All right. So there's two questions in there.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever get rid of cancer, but I think there is hope that we can stop people from dying from it. Because we're always going to get cancer. If you live long enough, or a population lives long enough, somebody's going to get cancer. But I think we can get to a spot where we won't have to worry about as many people dying from cancer. I don't know when that will be, 10, 20, 50, 100 years. But as long as we can treat somebody, find it, detect it, and then treat it, I think we'll get to a point where it won't be the health crisis that it is now.
Yeah, because it's right up there with obesity, isn't it?
Yeah, they're right there. And I mean, heart disease kills everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, heart disease, obesity, cancer, they're all linked.
It's just an interesting subject because like I was telling you earlier, there's a lot of people out there that don't really, they know about cancer, they know what it is, but do they? Like, do they know what it is? I feel like a lot of people don't. I sure as hell don't. I mean, especially talking more about it, there's a lot of things that we hear about. We know something is bad, but do we necessarily know how many dangers there are behind it? And do you want to know those dangers? Would it make you go mad? I mean, there's a lot of things that could be a cause of it. I mean, we accept the risk, like if we smoke or if we, do these things, you understand they put it on the box. They are able to narrow down those carcinogens that will cause these certain things. But there's also things that we use on a daily basis that could be a factor for someone or thing like that. And even the sun is supposed to be beneficial, but also too much of it.
Yeah, well, there's that moderation thing again, right? It's too
Yeah.
much sun is bad. Not enough, you might get MS. Yeah, it's all in moderation. You brought up Agent Orange before. That's one of those things where, all right, this is this great new thing for war, and we don't know the long-term effects of it. It wasn't until the 80s, 90s, well, people are still dying from Agent Orange exposure 50 years later. So, that's one of those things. We come up with something new that has these well and good intentions. I don't know if Agent Orange had any good intentions, other than war, part of the war machine. But, we got these new, you bring up food additives. All right, we've got this new food additive, but we don't really know the long-term effects of it. So, there's lots of just research. Takes time.
Takes
And
time.
people don't have time. It takes time and money. And if you want to invest in time, that money and that time,
We can't rush progress either. Nobody likes a crappily done house.
you wouldn't know it the way they're going up around here right now.
Well, Brian, I really do appreciate you giving me your time and everything to do the podcast. Is there a place where people can find any of your links?
um,
Twitter?
Twitter. I'm on Instagram. There's a website on the Clemson.edu site as well. I don't know it off the top of my head.
I can link it in the description.
Okay. I just got a new computer, so it's not even bookmarked on this one. But yeah, you can follow, you can go to the Clemson.edu and search for my name. Twitter, my Twitter account is mostly my lab stuff here. And that's at DRB_booth. Yeah.
Well, I'll make sure I link it all in the description. It's been a pleasure chatting. Thanks for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank.